You usually fix it, not all the time, right?
Yeah, sometimes.
I just grab some silence from the room and snap it on top of everything. Like,
Mm.
if there's a problem that way, you don't have to go with the pencil tool.
Silence in that spot and then crossfade. Even in the middle of a vowel, like a held note.
I mean, I'll fade it in and out, but I'd rather
Still
do that
works.
than the pencil tool. I don't like a mouse though. Anytime I can not be using it.
Yeah, exactly. That's true. Go ahead.
Live with it.
Live with it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
That's true.
It's a natural voice.
It's natural, yeah.
It's true.
I'm usually of that ilk too. Like as soon as you take, and then somebody says, well, let's take this thing down, and you go to mastering and it gets smashed, and all of a sudden it's like, I never even heard that, and it's like, that's happened.
Yeah.
That's a drag. I think that's a pretty good thing to think about is what you do now with your audio. You may, if you're in the mixing process or tracking process, those things are going to be hit somewhere else and they may never get compressed or limited or squashed in any kind of way. But if there's a chance that they do, those things that don't matter now are going to matter a lot. You didn't even know they were there. You hear it in mastering and you come back and you listen to it and you're like, it sure is there, but it's 20 dB lower. Who knew?
Another good trick is when you're like editing vocals is to actually put like a high compression or limiter on it so you can hear all that stuff.
Right.
And it's a lot easier to like, get the breaths right on.
Yeah, what he's saying is when you're editing, squash the vocal really hard so you can hear those things actually come up as if they were hit maybe in mastering or something. Sometimes I've also done, if you have a held note and we've zoomed in, the waveform looks like this. You know, you find the zero crossing where the audio is coming over the 0 point. You can grab one right next to it. There's a thing like this with a squiggly in it. You can grab one down the line that's the same length. Since it's a held note and somebody's going, you can just grab a little part of that and put it in there. Crossfades really tight. Never know it was there. Sometimes that works great. Anybody else want to say anything on the mouth noises? And what about in the analog world, physical things like potato chips? Any mic technique or choices or?
The sour candy to help with that sexy breath.
Sexy breath.
Yeah,
Sexy breath
get
candy.
the mouth all watery and stuff like that when you're doing sexy things.
Okay, right on. Some glottal fricative juice. Yeah. Okay. What about with vocal recording? Any particular notes about mic technique, or what if there's a sound you don't like, in particular with the vocalists, and obvious thing would be change mics, change preamps, or something else. What about mic technique or anything? Anybody want to share about issues you've had with getting a vocal sound that you're looking for? And you've heard somebody in the room and go, they sound amazing, but they don't for some reason when I record them. What can you think of?
Being too close to the mic is like some people's disease. Like it's been my thing lately, untraining people from the MTV video.
Right.
Of like needing to be all up on the mic, so that's been some people don't do well with proximity effects. If you don't know how to use proximity effects, it's not a good thing.
Right. What is proximity effect for the people that may not know what it is?
The bass increases as you get closer to a cardioid mic.
The bass is increased as you get closer to a mic that has a
You can
cardio.
put it nominally, I guess, too. But
Yeah. What I like to do is use a condenser mic, like a large diaphragm and cardioid, and then a small like diaphragm or dynamic or whatever, omnidirectional on top to get like more of the high frequency anyway. Use two of them and blend them together.
I don't like the face coming into that.
Yeah. You have to play with it. Like if they're super close together, like almost touching, you can't really hear it.
I take the pop filter and stick it out. And that's a barrier.
That's a classic technique. What he's saying is if, in a nutshell, with especially with mics that have a tighter pattern like cardioid, hypercardioid, etc., there's something called proximity effect, so the bass gets more accentuated as you get closer to the mic, and it sounds like this. So there's a lot more bottom end. Not only is it louder, but it's thicker. The question was if you don't, or the statement was if you don't want that, how do you get them to stand back? Because 99.9% of the time you say, well, can you stand back from the mic? Yeah, that's cool. I love you, or something like that. It automatically come back into the microphone. So he's saying take the pop filter and bring it back. So they're like, it really does work.
You can also,
if you like the pop filter.
you can
also helps keep headphones out of your
That's true.
out of your
Less
mic.
headphone bleed.
Yeah.
You can just turn them up in their headphones, then if they get too close, they're too loud.
Yeah, but then it's gonna
Good
be-
stuff.
Talk about headphones in the recording booth. The open back headphones, which I really like because you can hear everything else around you.
Yeah.
They really suck when you get in there.
Yeah, right.
It's like, oh gee, where's all that music coming from?
It's like, yeah, I really love you. There's always some little bitty drums in there somewhere, and you're like, ah. And then you compress the vocal, and you're like, drag.
Yeah. But I just wanted to mention something, if you don't mind me switching instruments for a second, about the distance thing. I recorded people playing trumpets and things like that, where if they don't have SM57 in front of them, you kind of bounce back and forth and yell at the audience all the time. So sometimes just putting something in front of them helps a lot.
Yeah, the dummy mic. I've seen that before too. It's like, okay, I put up 5 mics to see which one you like, and have the person sing in the wrong mic and turn the other one on. You're like, oh, that one's an omni, that sounds better. I like it. Somebody else?
I think it's an interesting thing to talk about how much you're sending to the artist's headphones when they're
That's a
tracking vocals. And
great, and what you're sending, right?
Yeah, and if you want them to back off a little bit, you send them a little bit more. Or if you feel like they need to have more energy and hit it, bring them down. So then they overcompensate, turn the preamp down, and then just kind of play that whole balancing act of.
For sure.
But it's like it's a whole beast in its own world.
Yeah, and save that thought too, because that'll apply to other instruments, especially drums and things. It's like hi-hat, etc. Like, killing the hi-hat, put more in his headphones, bring that back, but back to the vocal recording. That's a good thought. What you put in the headphones to get we're going to do something about how to get a compelling performance from an artist, but specifically, what's the issue you're having? If we're talking about volume, that's one thing. Put more in the headphones. It's like, oh, maybe you want them to pull back. They're belting too hard.
Yeah.
They're going to sing more in their head tone or something. Also, what frequencies you put in their headphones, how much bass versus high end can really change how their pitch is. So that's something to consider, is the more bass you have in the headphones may determine their pitch center is a little different. That's a pretty big deal, and I really yeah, right. There's plenty of things related to that. We're going to get to that too. I was thinking about how many people here are producing complete tracks for people and creating instruments and those kind of things, or several people? Okay. Do you have people bring in demos and say, can you produce, here's my piano and vocal demo, but I want it to sound like blah blah blah? Is that something you guys have done, that kind of thing? What happens when a track develops? Let's say you came in and you produced the track this far, and they're really liking the bass, drums, and this keyboard thing, and they go home and maybe they've written this at home and they've written the vocal to those sounds, and you're like, I'm a producer, I can do all this other stuff, and you make the track sound amazing. It's like, now we're ready for the vocal. The question is, they're not used to singing to these new sounds, and you've created these new harmonies with these bell parts or these horn stabs or something, trying to get their pitch center based on something that's in their headphone mix that it used to be the piano or it used to be the synths. Those things were more prominent, so now they're singing to these other harmonies and things. A lot trickier for other people, so that's a big deal with what you're saying about headphone mixes, is the arrangement itself, and the headphone mix is so unbelievably neglected in trying to get good performances. And if you guys are musicians and have been in the studio as a player, you know how big a deal is what you have in your headphones. I think a lot of engineers, for years I had like crappy monitoring when I was first starting out. Like, well, I spent this money on this thing, but I got this $4 headphone thing here for the amp, when I was like, wow, that's really lame. If I were up there singing or whatever, I didn't have the right thing in my headphones. It's a pretty big deal. When you're doing that at home, you have a tendency to just create the track and then go in and say, I'm going to do the vocal, without spending time of going, what do I want to sing to? Everything may not be as important, so it's a pretty big deal. Anybody want to say something else about miking techniques or for vocals?
This is from Jasmine.
From who is that again?
Jasmine.
Jasmine, okay.
Yeah, wanted to know if you could talk about stereo mic technique or using two mics.
For vocals?
Yeah.
Okay. Anybody want to jump on that one?
I
No.
just wanted to add something to what you were saying.
Okay. Headphones.
Yeah, to the vocal, to the mix of the headphones. I've had bands come in where it was basically kind of a punk and rock kind of thing, very rhythm oriented, not a lot of melodies, and the guy wanted to hear the guitars, and it just wasn't working because the words weren't matching up to the beat. So those kind of things, and you get the opposite too. You get someone, kind of like a Freddie Mercury kind of thing, very melody oriented. You gotta find the right instrument to put in the mix, right?
Yeah, that's a really good comment, because that can even be section specific in a production. You can work with people that have a very legato, laid back, kind of fluid, bendy kind of vocal technique that may not be as rhythmic, but there may be some section or somebody else that's really rhythmic. And if you want them to be more legato and behind the beat and fluid, you may want to take the rhythm instruments back in the headphones and pull the other strings and things forward. And the same thing for rhythmic stuff. It's like they've been singing this smooth part to the rhythms really being, in the background. It's like, all right, we need to bring this stuff up so that the guy can really hear what this 16th on that second 16th of 3 or something is. Otherwise it's just right, exactly. So. The question about stereo miking for vocals. Anybody do multiple miking? You already mentioned that you like to use a couple mics on some vocalists. Anybody else use multiple miking techniques?
For like live recordings, yeah, if you want to get space in it. But
Or like for gospel choirs and stuff.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, but for single sources, right?
That's
mid-side.
Mid-side. I was going to throw that out.
Yeah, because then you can decide later, whether you just want the one mic or you can add the stereo as much as you want.
Yeah, I usually do more than one mic if you have a lot of elements that are not in the mix yet. So you're recording vocals just to some basic tracks, and you're not going to be able to change those vocals. Then get some options.
Yeah, I just read this thing. Electronic musician, I think it was. They had a deal where you were doing stereo miking using a cardioid mic with a figure 8 right on the top of it.
Right. It's talking about mid-side.
And that grabs it. It's a whole different thing. It was quite interesting. I tried it out. It worked pretty cool.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I use that for several things. Pete's a fan of that too. This is related to what you're saying to some degree, is stereo miking. In my experience, that tracks are cheap these days. If you're on a DAW, if you're on tape, then you got to be a lot more planning about how you're going to put things down. But it can be kind of cool if you really have a vision for where a production is going, and that okay, this is the sound I'm going for at the end. Then you may have a good idea. But if things are developing and naturally happening, sometimes it's cool to have that extra option instead of saying, well, okay, I want the vocals on the chorus to have this kind of roomy, spread out sound, but I want the verse to be okay. There's obviously the synthetic option of pulling it out of a reverb box or something and making a room sound using a stereo reverb. But there's an interesting article about David Bowie recordings using multiple microphones and having a gate on the room mic with a side chain, so that when he actually is singing louder, and it could be even certain frequencies, you pick a tune or technique, but as you hit it in certain sections of songs, you may say, hey, I want to use this stereo mic on this, or I have a room mic because I got this big hey thing going on, right? And it doesn't sound hey right here. So you've got the room. If it's as cool as this one, it's cheap to throw up another mic. So to answer the question for stereo miking for individuals, tracks are cheap, try it out, try everything out. There's just because everybody has a U47 with a blah blah blah, give it a shot. It can sound really cool.
I think my clients really like the fact that there'll be two microphones. They get so used to it. There's only one option.
Yeah.
It's like he already chose it. Or she already chose it. That's what I get.
Right.
And even if you have your go-to one, I end up finding myself, well, let me just put this over here in the corner in this, backwards and see what happens. So if it's already set up and wired, you're more likely to play with it.
It absolutely, and it's so cool sometimes to even mute this mic.